there's nothing more exciting than science. You get all the fun of sitting still, being quiet, writing down numbers, paying attention. Science has it all.
Hey, I just met you, and this is crazy, but here's my number, so call me maybe. It's hard to look right at your baby, but here's my number, so call me maybe.
This is IPS Podcast 1.1, the very first of many podcasts this year. This is about the nature of science, and we're going to see if Principal Seymour Skinner, not to be confused with Dr. Sue Skinner, but let's see if Principal Skinner is right about his perceptions of science. One of the things we'll talk about a lot this year is the nature of science, what science is. Now, science is the study of all things natural phenomena, things like light or electricity or biology, the study of life. But all science has one thing in common, and that is you learn science through the process of discovery. It is not through reading these things in a book. So, the language of science, it is called math. I think you've heard of that before. So, these numbers here, or these equations, are all part of the discovery process where we measure things out and we calculate amounts. But one of the things we need to consider is that the units are what tell the story. So we might have 3 meters here, or we might also have 3 seconds. The unit of F up here is, and that's a force, is called a Newton. So we may have 6.2 newtons. Those all tell the story. Alright, so scientists from all over, every walk of life, from ages 9 to 99, use this scientific method. It's the tool of an organized discovery. So what I'd like to do is just run you through it and also use some examples of types of, a way we could set up the scientific method. So I actually have a bowl here, and we're going to fill it full of ice cream, big scoops of cotton candy ice cream, which are that color. Yep. I always have 2 scoops, so I'm going to put another one in here. Yes. All right. Great coloring. Thank you. Alright, so I've got my ice cream, and let's go through the first step. And the first step of the scientific method is to ask a question. Now, perhaps, it being summer or still being summer, we maybe have a preferential temperature at which we like to eat our cotton candy ice cream. So that's the question. The question will be, what temperature is optimal, or is the best to consume, consume cotton candy ice cream. Alright? That's our question. Step 2 is form a hypothesis. Now, before we get into a hypothesis, let's talk about what we do before we form that hypothesis. And that is, we do a little research. And maybe we have a bucket or 2 or 3 of cotton candy ice cream. And we have them at different times and different, maybe we've consumed our share of cotton candy ice cream. I know I have. And so, when you research this stuff, you can actually come up with a pretty good estimate or a guess or a prediction of what you think is going to happen. And that's what a hypothesis is. It's a researched prediction. Now, a lot of people, when they say, when they answer the question, what is a hypothesis, they always say, educated guess. But that doesn't really answer the question because you've been spitting that out since maybe the third grade. We're going to consider that we have to research and then we predict. And that's what a hypothesis is. Step 3, we're going to design the experiment. And that means we're going to test the hypothesis. We're going to see if that hypothesis is right or wrong. So remember, our question was based on the temperature of our ice cream. So let's put a little thermometer in here, and let's maybe put a little red line in there. That's the, but that's going to be one of our variables, one of the things that we are going to change, and that is called our independent variable. So we'll write that down here. This is what we manipulate. So we make some changes to this independent variable. So this is our temperature. Now we also have a dependent variable. The dependent variable is going to be dependent on the independent variable. And that is our taste. We also have things that are constant, that don't change. So a constant in this case might be the bowl, or it could be our temperature probe, because we always want to keep the same temperature probe. It might be calibrated to that particular test. It is also the flavor of ice cream. It might be the people that are tasting the ice cream. You might have a taste test, and so you might have 4 or 5 people. All these things are constant. You'll keep the same 4 or 5 people. You keep the same thermometer. You keep the same ice cream. Okay, so we have our bowls of ice cream here. We're going to have 3 bowls of ice cream. One with a temperature that is about normal. One with a temperature that's a little bit warmer than normal. And one that's a little bit colder than normal. Now, let's just give these some values, because we do measure temperature. Whenever you watch television and watch the news at night, you'll see it. They'll give you a temperature, and we're going to give you a different temperature because this is going to be in degrees Celsius. So we'll say this is like negative 10 degrees Celsius, which is below freezing. I hope you all know that. We'll say this warmer one is about negative 5 degrees Celsius. And the colder one is negative 15 degrees Celsius. Now they're all below freezing, but there's a variance in here, and one of these is like our standard temperature that you might get ice cream out of the freezer, and that's our control. So control is a part of an experiment where you don't actually change the variable. All right, so if we are used to eating ice cream at negative 10 degrees Celsius, then we continue to eat ice cream at negative 10 degrees Celsius in our experiment, that's our control. This one is a little bit warmer, and this one's a little bit cooler. Now, the degrees Celsius is a form of quantitative data. So, now this refers back to quantity, and so this means we have measured data, which means we also have a number, and we also have units. Okay, so that is a value that we measure, quantitative. Now, when we are measuring, though, how well we like this ice cream, well, maybe we don't measure that. I don't know if you can measure taste. So we can just say, negative 10 is okay, but it's not my cup of tea. And negative 5 is just too mushy. But negative 15 is just right. I like it nice and, right there, yes. So that's how I like my ice cream. And so negative 15 is a yes, and that means this is qualitative. It refers back to the quality. You can't really measure taste. You either like it or you don't. And so this has to do with the quality. Okay, so we say this is non-measurable. So, step 4 is you run your experiment, you observe your results. And that's a huge part of science, is observing your results. So, yeah, you would sit there and you would take very good readings. You would make sure that you're very precise. And we'll talk about precision in the next podcast. And you'll talk about accuracy in the next podcast as well. But you're going to run your experiment. You're going to observe your results. You're going to make sure that everything is as accurate and precise as you can. And then you have an answer. In my case, I like cold ice cream. The colder the better. Okay? Negative 15 degrees Celsius, remember that. All right? And so from there, we can actually ask more questions. So maybe my next question has to do with whether I like sprinkles or not. And that could be the next question. And the thing about science is that it just doesn't ever stop. You can keep asking questions, which creates some problems because a lot of people want answers. Yet the nature of science doesn't ever give us straight up answers. It always gives us an answer of, yes, we figured it out in this experiment, but we could do it in sprinkles. And so a lot of people aren't satisfied with that. And that's one of the problems that science runs into. It's like, we have an answer. It's not the perfect answer, but this is a really good answer. And we run into that a lot with things that are really difficult to understand. Like, for instance, you're going to read about the Higgs boson. That is something that not a lot of people understand, and so they're kind of skeptical about it. But the science that we have that discovered the Higgs boson is pretty solid. Another thing is, and it's been pretty topical lately, is climate change. We got a lot of good science that says that the climate is warming and humans are the cause of it. Yet, it's not definitive. There's always more questions to ask, and those questions are part of the scientific method. All right, I know this has been a long podcast, and I want to rip through the last 3 slides here, the last 4 slides. And you can use the pause to copy these down, but these are the terms we want you to master. We want you to be really comfortable with these terms as we go along in this unit. So hypothesis, constant, control, independent variable, dependent variable, qualitative data, and quantitative data. So let's read through these. A hypothesis is, after you research a question, it's a prediction of the outcome. A constant are the parts of the experiment that remain the same. A control is a trial of an experiment that is not changed or manipulated to compare to one of the variables. Independent variable, that's the one part of an experiment that is manipulated. The dependent variable is the one part of an experiment that changes due to the manipulation of the independent variable. Qualitative data is data observed that is non-measurable. So color, texture, shape, taste, those are all examples. And then quantitative data, that is measured data that has a number and a unit. We're almost done here. This is the last slide, but I want to take a moment to talk about something that you may or may not have heard before. It's called STEM. STEM is an acronym, and it's used in a lot of science classes nowadays. And it stands for science. It stands for, let's get the order here right. Erase. Technology. And then the E is for engineering. And the M is for math. Now we're going to be doing all 4 of these in this class. This is a STEM class. It's designed for STEM. And you're going to do a little bit of science. You're going to use a little bit of technology. You're going to engineer something. And then you're going to use some math to wrap it all up. So keep those things in mind. This is not just a science class. It's really a STEM class. And we like to use all of these tools to get you to learn about all sorts of new cool things. So this is podcast number 1. I'm out.